It stood poised and ready to fly. With smooth lines, one could imagine the wind rushing quickly over its sleek body. This is not a traditional airplane. The forward doors are opened with a push of the button. The door raises upward and rotates forward, giving an unobstructed view of this modern personal transportation device. The cockpit looked more like a luxurious sports car than a general aviation airplane. I knew I was in for a treat when I saw this stylish and functional design. Hi, my name is Carl Valeri, and I blog at expertaviator.com. And today, I want to take you along for a short journey during my first flight in the Cirrus SR22 GTS. This is truly a revolutionary airplane and personal transportation breakthrough. Jeff from V1 Clothing will be giving me my introductory flight in the SR22. After his walk around and easy climb into the cockpit, I settled into this ergonomically designed seat, surrounded by a continuously curving cockpit. We both commented on how this airplane is more sophisticated in many ways than the airliners we have flown. After a quick tour of the interior's amenities and briefing me on how to exit and enter the aircraft, we added another item to the safety briefing, and I'd never been exposed to this: the parachute handle. Situated between us in the divider above the two doors is a red handle whose operation consists of a simple pull, and we're floating to Earth. I turned to Jeff and asked, when will we ever use such a device? He said this could save your life, especially over inhospitable terrain, including water, but like any parachute, you need some altitude before pulling the chute. The large engine rumbled to life with a simple but thorough starting procedure. One thing that made me feel at home is a simple T-handle throttle that's similar to the jet I fly at work. The only difference was a mixture control next to the handle. I turned to Jeff and said, "Where's the prop control?" He responded with a smile, "The prop is controlled automatically." Wow, how simple can you get? Jeff let me taxi the plane, which took some getting used to, but since I had flown Grumman products, I had experienced the castering nose wheel. For the first few turns, I had to remind myself to tap the brakes instead of using the rudder or a tiller to steer. As with any castering nose wheel, it becomes second nature in short order. During the taxi, one of the most notable items is the amazing visibility afforded by the windows that surround you. It almost reminded me of the great visibility from my days in the bubble canopy of a Piper Tomahawk. Oh, and one more important item, especially in Florida, it had air conditioning. Man, what a great feature. No more having to keep the door cracked. Simply turn it on and works just like in a car. There's some unique items installed in this plane which I haven't had much time to be schooled in. One item is the separate alternators and their importance. When we took off, we had to make sure number 2 was running. We align ourselves with the runway, push the power forward, and away we go. A unique noise you'll hear from the engine while you're taking off is the propeller adjusting as we gain power and airspeed down the runway due to the automatic prop control. Acceleration was quick and we were off the ground in short order, pulling the nose up and climbing rapidly away from the ground. Noise in the cockpit is similar to many single-engine aircraft during takeoff. It's slightly less noisy, but that could be attributed to the Bose noise-canceling headsets I was using. Ours was a short flight, but once underway, Jeff let me do some maneuvers such as steep turns and some slow flight. This is a comfortable aircraft in all flight regimes, with great responsiveness to your control inputs. A unique flight control design is the single-handed side yoke, which helps you keep coordinated turns through linkages with the rudder. This was slightly odd during takeoff, and I was anticipating a foreign feeling during our landing. At times I felt as if the controls were fighting me, but I'm sure with experience this will feel more natural. Steep turns were a dream. With the little hat trim tab on the control yoke, I'm able to trim all the forces out of the controls during all phases, especially steep turns. Talk about reducing fatigue while flying. Not knowing how to use Autopilot, Jeff demonstrated the ease of use, and it seemed to operate very similar to the airlines we both fly with a flight director guiding the way. When he looked at me and said, "You want to see something really cool?" Normally this is the last surge you hear before someone does something really dangerous, but since this was demo flight, I felt a little more at ease and said, yeah, sure. He then put the aircraft into a nose-high, unusual attitude and pushed a button on the autopilot. Immediately and smoothly, the autopilot lowered the nose, leveled the wings. An auto-leveling autopilot. What a great feature, especially if you succumb to spatial disorientation. So with a ballistic parachute, auto-leveling feature, and a flight display on a large screen, I can see how this would be a very safe platform for anyone looking for transportation for their family that's both economical and quick. Well, speaking of economics, let's first look at fuel consumption. After leveling off and picking up our friend in Plant City, we accelerated quickly to 160 knots. This is a respectable speed, especially with our fuel burn of only 14 gallons per hour. This is similar to the 182 I fly, and I fly 30 knots slower. Thus, on a miles per gallon basis, we were saving fuel in the Cirrus. The largest expense for this airplane is, of course, the acquisition costs. And for a used Cirrus, you're looking around $300,000 or more. So this might not be as economical for many of us, but it's hard to put a price on all the safety features. The GTS variant of this aircraft includes TKS anti-icing, or what we call weeping wing. It has an electronic propeller or hot prop. With approval for flight into known icing conditions, this makes me feel much safer than in most unequipped aircraft, although it's more of a system to get you out of icing than to fly continuously in icing. With that said, I sure would love this feature on my airplane. The other wonderful safety features is the incredible visibility and traffic alerting equipment. It has been proven that you'll see traffic earlier if you're given a warning as to the traffic in the immediate area. You'll be looking towards the known traffic earlier and in the right direction. Again, another safety benefit. So as we descended for landing, the positioning of the flaps was a simple flip of a switch. As we placed the full flaps and decelerate, I noticed the amazing view from the front window. Most noticeably for us high-wing pilots is the lack of having to duck your head and look around the wing above you. Although it's still important to clear for traffic below, the nose-down attitude enabled us to view a very large area in front of us. During the round out and flare, I noticed the controls were light, but had some resistance which prevented over-controlling during the flare. With the mechanical attachments between the roll input and the rudder, it seemed slightly unnatural during the landing, but it didn't feel as if I couldn't cross-control and land with a proper wing-low position, which is good because this day the wind was gusting 12 to 18 knots. So on landing, I did a full stall landing, and it seemed familiar, and then I had to remind myself that, well, the nose wheel is not attached to the steering mechanism. And as I tried to turn towards the taxiway exit, I noticed it was not turning as quickly as normal aircraft. About that time, I said to myself, oh yeah, castering nose wheel. And with a slight touch of the brake, I was turning in the correct direction. Of course, parking is great in that you can turn the aircraft in a circle very easily and in a small area. I got a chuckle from Jeff when I immediately opened the door to let air in the aircraft after landing. He looks over to me and pointed at the air conditioning knob. I smiled and said, "Ah, the luxury of air conditioning." I then closed the door and turned the air conditioning on high, which cooled us down quickly. After we stopped and picked up our friend Ray, it was my turn to be passenger and see how comfortable the back seat was. As I looked around the cabin from the back, I realized I didn't have my sunglasses on, and it didn't seem that bright. So then I asked about the windows, and he said they were tinted. I had forgotten that one before we got in. The other great part of being a backseat passenger in the Cirrus is the incredible views out the windows and below. The slim wing mounted forward on the fuselage gives the rear seat passengers a wonderful view of the world below. For the first time, I truly felt comfortable in the backseat of an airplane. Great leg room and the ability to recline allowed me to get quite comfortable. So I spent the rest of my day taking videos Central Florida. After landing, it was my turn to take off again, and we were headed back to home base. With my initial excitement waning, I began looking more intently at the details of this aircraft. There's these two large screens in front of me, and it made me easier to fly from either seat, and I was in the right seat, so that helped. The large electronic attitude and heading reference system made it very intuitive to fly, and the airspeed and altitude tape made it easy for me to navigate using small eye movements. I think my favorite display on the right, which included a navigation screen and a system screen that was very useful during starting up and leaning. Used in navigation mode, it would be hard to get lost with such a large map in front of you at all times. There's much functionality behind this multifunction display, including safe taxi and a large charts database. There's almost no reason to have your charts with you except for, of course, the safety of redundancy. As far as ergonomics, this is a wonderfully laid out cockpit and cabin which obviously included much customer input during the design. The only drawback that I can see is the fact that if you are tall, you'll need to recline the seat slightly to fit in the cabin. My legs are short and my head was touching the ceiling if I pulled the seat forward. This was remedied by a slightly recline, giving me the feeling of being on a high performance, say, aerobatic plane or fighter. Overall, the Cirrus was a joy to fly. Truly great cross-country airplane with amazing electronics and multiple layers of safety you normally would see built into transport category aircraft, barring the extra engine, of course. I'd feel comfortable flying over unfriendly terrain knowing I could use the parachute if I lost an engine. I also think that flying over water would be somewhat safer since the risk of flipping over once we hit the water would be alleviated. Actually, this was demonstrated recently by a water landing done by a Cirrus in the Caribbean. If I had the money and wanted to fly long distances, this would be the plane I'd buy. The only thing missing compared to this cabin airplane and the other passenger airplanes is the second entry and the toilet. Otherwise, your friends and family would be more than comfortable flying to exotic locations, and you'd feel more comfortable flying with them there because of the many safety features. Well, I hope you enjoyed coming along with me on this introductory flight of the Cirrus SR22 GTS. If you've ever been in a Cirrus, I'd encourage you to see for yourself what, in my mind, is the safest, most stylish, and most comfortable four-seat aircraft on the market right now. This has been Carl Valeri, and links to more information about Cirrus can be found at my blog, expertaviator.com. And special thanks to our friends at V1 Clothing for this demonstration flight. Clear skies and safe flying.